This is one of the most inspiring athlete case studies we've had. Gary is 62, a first responder with a brutal night shift schedule. And for years, he chipped away at his fitness, but once he switched to our one-on-one coaching, everything changed. He is now the fittest he has ever been. And I don't just mean since joining us on the program, I mean in his whole life. This is the best he's been running. His goals when he came in were to run a sub 155 half and a sub 4 hour 10 marathon. He was in the 420s for his marathon running and just recently ran a 351 marathon. That's over 30 minutes wiped off over the last 3 years. A specific 26-minute PB since his first marathon with us, and now, all while averaging just 4 runs a week. And so the question is, how did he do it? Well, today we're breaking down exactly what training he did to achieve the results that once felt impossible for him. So let's start with the first point. He's 62 years old, and he's running the best he ever has. That, for me, is just the unbelievable part. And I just want to touch on what he was doing before he came to us, because he was on our general program, which we used to offer for a few years, and he got decent results. He was chipping away and getting incremental improvement. But once he switched to the one-on-one coaching, this is always the case once this happens, his results skyrocketed. And I just want to talk about why we don't offer that general program anymore, because we know that one-on-one coaching isn't for everyone. Not everyone can do it for various reasons. And so we tried to offer our programming without coaching, which a lot of people request us for. And Dad, we just found that people would get okay results, but they wouldn't get the results we would expect with our one-on-one coaching. And that just frustrated us, because when there's not an external voice just keeping you accountable and just checking over things to make sure you're doing the right training, any type of training will improve you for sure. Any type of consistency will improve you for sure. We had a lot of athletes, staying consistent on that and not seeing the same type of improvements that we get from one-on-one. And so we just decided that actually kind of frustrated us, and we just discontinued that program because we didn't like seeing athletes put in the work like that. We really wanted to help them, but it wasn't part of our one-on-one coaching. And we know that with the one-on-one, they get that help. So that's why we just decided we've just got the one type of coaching, and that's what we're good at, and that's what we're going to do to guarantee the results.
Yeah, I think we underestimate how important it is to have someone who can adjust the program, and that could be for work changes reasons, or for injury, or for sickness. Whereas when you're just doing your own program by yourself, you've got the program, and he had our program, but he didn't have anybody to run past adjustments that were needed. He was doing those adjustments himself. And that's the value of having the coach, is to work out, okay, you might have missed 2 sessions. Do you just catch up those sessions, or do you move on to where you were and just forget about those sessions? So those discussions have to happen. And when you're doing it by yourself, you're talking to yourself about what should I do, and you're sometimes not the best judge, because the motivated athlete will just try to do, and we've had athletes try to catch up 2 missed sessions. They'll do one of them in the morning, and then they'll catch up the next missed session that afternoon. So, they'll do that for 2 days and catch up those 4 sessions instead of just, having a discussion and working out what the best solution is. They just don't want to miss the sessions. That's the motivated athlete. And then you've got the converse reaction of the unmotivated athlete, who knows no one is making them accountable, because no one's looking at their program, because it's just a program that they've been given and it's up to them to do it. And so they're more likely to miss more sessions. And that's what we've found, is that, A, you don't adjust properly. B, you miss more sessions because you don't have someone who is watching whether hey, Jordan, did you do that session today? And if you just have yourself to talk to about that, it doesn't matter, I'll catch up that session another time. And all of a sudden you've missed, 1 session here, 2 sessions next week. And over a period of 6 weeks, you might have lost 8 sessions. Whereas if you've got someone who actually makes you accountable, and not that that's forcing you to do the training, but you've got a journey with a coach where, both of you are invested in your ultimate goal, which is improvement. And so straight away you've got, that added value of someone who cares about your improvement and really genuinely wants to know why you didn't actually do the session today. And, whatever the reason is, there needs to be a good reason why you're not doing it. And there'll be a reason. And there could be the reason is I'm just all of a sudden feeling lazy and don't want to do it. And that's okay as well. And that's what you could discuss with your coach. And I think, don't underestimate those valuable, seemingly less important things. But I think the proof in this is he was on that program and the improvements were there. Definitely. He was getting better. but now it's alarming improvement. Like, from 423 to 417 is quite significant from 417 to 351. That is a huge jump. And that the only difference is one was where he was doing himself with a really good program. And the second section where he got the bigger jump, you would expect the biggest jump from the 423 to 417. You would expect that to be a bigger jump than, that's still a 5 or 6 minute improvement, but you wouldn't expect that 28-minute improvement when you've got a coach helping you. And so that's a really important point that the listeners out there who are trying to wing it themselves, don't underestimate how valuable it is to have someone who can actually make you accountable, who can see what to do and adjust the program. And having that flexibility, Jord, how difficult it is when we've got athletes who are shift workers, who have, we've even had 7 days on, 7 days off. We've had people who work night shift one week and then day shift a whole next week. So, we have people who have even, Tom, I can give an example, Tom Page, for those who know Tom, he might have starting at 7 and finishing at 9:30. And so where in that day is he going to train? Yet he's a professional triathlete, So having the understanding that there are opportunities for a coach to fix that. And we've got an example of someone who might only have 30 minutes on a Tuesday, then 30 minutes on a Wednesday. And then you can actually say it's okay to do a 15 to 20-minute run and a 20-minute ride on those 2 days. And knowing that the rest of the week, we've solved the solution of having 2 days where you've actually got limited time. So I think that's a big thing for Gary. And I think that was the biggest change, that having someone take over and give him more direction.
It's a great example and a reminder that, there's no such thing as a perfect program, because then there would just be a program out there that everyone could just follow, and there was nothing that different about the generic program we were giving. We make the best kind of 12-week plan for an event that we can, but someone has to follow it. But we know from our own coaching and programming that by week 2, the plan's completely different because so much has changed. And so what the original plan was to get to kind of week 3, by the time they get to week 3, everything's been thrown out the window. Things have changed, shifts have changed, what they did the week before has changed, and so you need that constant adjustment. And you and I had a really clear example of this yesterday where, I find so much value in still having you as a coach and bouncing ideas off you. Even though I know exactly what to do, I still make big mistakes myself as an athlete. And no matter who we are, we always make mistakes, and you do the same vice versa with me. But, we got to yesterday morning, you said, what's the plan for today? And I just kind of said, well, I'm supposed to do, quite an easy zone 2 bike and run, but I'm just not feeling that great. And you said straight away, well, don't do it. And I said, oh, no, I'll get it done. I just don't feel that good. And you go, no, you're in really good shape and you're in the peak marathon training phase. You should be kind of jumping out. And I just had a deload week last week, and you're kind of saying, what's happening? Because you should be jumping out of your skin to train after a bit of recovery. And I said, I just feel a little bit under the weather, a bit of a sore throat and blocked nose. And you said, absolutely no running, and just spin your legs for 20 minutes if you want to jump on the bike. And I never would have come to that conclusion myself, just the motivated mindset of, I've got my training plan, I want to get it all done, I don't want to miss any days, I'm just going to force myself to run. And as soon as you said that, I just had a relief, like, oh, you're right, I really don't feel like running, and that's okay. And you just need a coach to kind of bounce that idea off and to tell you that. And I would tell any athlete the same thing, but you don't think of it yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's what Gary's done so well is, he's got you in his corner, and you're the voice of reason, and he's super motivated. He's loving the program. He just give me more, Jordan, and for you, it's really just trying to control that. And even you yesterday were saying, well, if I don't run, I won't get my total kilometres that I'm aiming for, and I'm saying, don't worry about that. It's not about total kilometres. That's a really good thing to say afterwards, that, oh yeah, I averaged 80k this week and 85 last week. But that's not the purpose of our program. It's not to see you can accumulate the most kilometres. It's to do each day according to how you feel. And you've got to keep asking yourself how you're feeling on any given day. And that's what we're trying to say, where, Gary going from doing his own program to having a coach in his corner, the coach is asking him, how are you coping with this program? What's your fatigue like? and then we will adjust the program up or down. Whereas if you just got this generic program that's still a good program, there's nothing wrong with it, as long as there's nothing going wrong with you, as in terms of sickness, work, social life, so you will just plow ahead no matter what, because the program says I have to do this. Whereas if you can discuss it with your coach, then you're going to come out with probably maybe the same answer, or you might adjust it. And that's the thing that I think in this case study we want to get across, where it is such an eye-opener for us to see someone. We've had a couple of people now who were doing our old non-coached program and now have switched across. Lee is one of the other guys that comes to mind, and he has never been in such good form. He trained really hard before when he was doing it by himself on our program, and he was improving. But boy, the changes! I can't wait to do a case study on him. And Gary is the one we're talking about now, and I'm so excited for him. As he's getting older, he's actually running faster than he ever has. And we're not talking a 40-year-old older guy. We're talking in his early 60s. So. So this is one for the ages. I think it's a great podcast to have for all the people out there, giving them hope that it's never too late to improve.
Yeah, sometimes the argument back is, well, I did a generic program and I improved. And we're not saying you wouldn't, as we always say, any type of training could help you improve. But you take that same athlete and you gave them a detailed one-on-one coaching program where you manipulated things all the time, I guarantee you'd improve more. So both would improve, but the latter would improve more, if you took the same athlete, that is. So let's go through Gary's story. Again, his original goals we mentioned were he wanted to run a one half marathon in under 1:55, and he's done that multiple times in training. He hasn't even had to do that in a race, which is fantastic. And run a 4-hour 10 marathon, and he did that in his second attempt with us. So his first attempt with us was 4:17. The next one he wiped off 9 minutes and ran a 4:07, which is fantastic. And we'll go through that 3:53 result very soon. But just talking about his schedule, it is such a difficult schedule. He's a first responder, and it's a crazy shift schedule. It's a 10-day cycle where it's a couple of days and a couple of nights, and then it just mixes and changes a lot. And we've really had to program around that 10 days with relentless night shifts. Sometimes it's 3 in a row, 4 in a row, but most importantly, constant changes. It's supposed to be something like 2 days, 3 nights, 5 days off, something like that. And almost every time without fail, he'll get to day 5 and he'll have been given an extra two night shifts in a row, or an extra 3-day shifts in a row. And for his own sanity, he just says, if I get 3 nights in a row, by the 3rd day, I am cooked. I can't train. And he has to have a night off or a day off just to catch up on sleep. And that's common amongst all our emergency responders, or even Roland mentioned it as a doctor, and Tom on previous podcasts, where they say, rather than trying to fit through a 7-day cycle, they overload the days where they're not working, and then just try and rest on the days where they have night shift or something. That's quite a common solution. But I joke with him that it's almost futile trying to schedule in the next 10 days in a row, because guaranteed by the time we get to day 5, it's changed. And so then we have to have a conversation and go, okay, you're at day 5 now. You've now got this surprise 3 night shifts in a row. You can only train 3 sessions over the next 4 days, or 2 sessions over the next 4 days. What are we prioritizing? And that's been a constant conversation of, what are our goals here? What's the next race that we're aiming towards? And what are the priority sessions? And what do we have to cut away or not prioritize? That's kind of one of the key things that I think has made a big difference for him.
Yeah, and look, I can't reiterate any more that what you've said. It's that flexibility and you get anxious about, am I doing the right program? And it's just that calming influence of saying, no, this is how we'll go about it. And once you start to see improvement, you will trust the program more. It's sad in some ways, but it's actually a fact. When you see that you're improving, you then trust that what we're doing is working, and then you're on board and 100% committed to the goal and the advice. And I think that's such an important aspect that people underestimate as well. Is you've got a guy who's really pushing to be a better athlete, and you've got a coach who wants to be on the journey with him. And that's the exciting part for me. It's when you see his result, Jordy, you could not wait to tell me. It was, he was so excited. I'm the same with you. Whenever somebody does something, we had the state titles cycling last week, and we had some of those we've talked about on the podcast many times, with that hell yeah phone call that you have when we always use the other term, which we don't talk about on the podcast.
Yeah,
Most
the
people
F word.
listen to it with their kids in the car sometimes. So we've learnt a lesson there not to use that word. But that's how excited it is, and you just love that conversation with the athlete who's achieved their goal. And it's not about first; it's about being better than they were ever before, and that's the value of a teamwork situation where you've got someone who's in your corner.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that process and these times coming down, and that phone call after that we got to have, where April 2024 last year, he'd only been on the one-on-one coaching program not long, and ran a 4:17 marathon in Canberra, which he was absolutely chuffed with. And then 12 months later, he did the same race. The difference was he was by November last year, he was absolutely flying across all three disciplines, swim, bike, and run. So he's a triathlete, but his focus has been on marathon. He was aiming for a 70.3 last year. His FTP was through the roof. His running was through the roof, but he had a really nasty crash a couple of weeks out from Melbourne 70.3, and it really rocked him for a couple of months. And we really couldn't start training properly again until January this year. So it was a very interrupted period, and very frustrating for him to be absolute peak form and then go a fair way backwards. But then by April, he was in good shape again and ran a 4:07, which was just, a 9-minute PB from the year before on the same course, which was phenomenal. Couldn't have asked for more. And then he actually said to me last year after that 4:17, look, I've got this pretty crazy goal I know I said 4:10 was my first goal, but I've got this, kind of dream of running 4 hours at one point. Do you think that's possible? And the Canberra course is quite hilly. So I said, if you can run that now, absolutely, you've got it in you to get to 4 hours. And we never put a ceiling on athletes. We always say, we're not going to say no to anything. It's just how long it could take to get there, And after running a 4:07 this year on that same hilly course, I said, you're in under 4 hour fitness right now, and you've got a lot more of that in you. And then, going into this race, which was a flat course, a fast flat course he chose to try and run his best time and a PB. Yeah, you said to me going into the weekend, how's Gary going to go this weekend? And I said, I don't think he realizes what shape he's in. I don't think he realizes that he can run anywhere from a 3:48 to a 3:53. And his own plan had him at a bit of a conservative kind of 3:58 because he was a bit sheepish that he might not be able to break the 4 hours. And so I said to him, we have full confidence that you're definitely going to break it. It's just how much can you break it by? And you need to have that confidence in yourself. And then, to do that and have that phone call, he was just absolutely chuffed.
I just want to jump in and say one of the reasons why he ended up with the time that you're going to talk about is mainly because he started so conservatively. And a lot of people think that, if you get too far behind the pace you're going to run, you want to run, it's harder to catch up. And it's just so not true. By giving yourself a really easy start, then you're giving yourself more opportunity to run. And so the story you tell will explain that.
Yeah, and I keep saying that the time 3:51 and 3:53, like which one did he run? Well, his marathon time 42.2k was 3:51, and in our estimations, that's what we kind of look at. And we always know that marathons are longer, and so his official time was 3:53. So you've got to take that. You've got to take the course as it is. It was 42.6 kilometers, as most of them end up being. So it was a 3:53. So his training peaks gives him marathon record 3:51, but his official time is 3:53. So you take 3:53 and work off that.
It's funny, Jordy, when you say we know that marathons aren't marathon times, marathon distances aren't marathon distances. What do you mean? A marathon's 42.2. What do you mean it's more? So for those who are not understanding that, if the course is measured on the shortest line, and as a marathon runner, you don't get to run the shortest line. You could run some of a course could have a lot of turns where you're running 5 wide, just like you are on an athletic track. If you run in lane 4 and do a 400 meter in lane 4, you'll end up running 410 meters instead of 400 if you do one lap. So same in a marathon course. Some courses you can end up running 400 meters more over 42k, and unfortunately that's the time you get given. But a lot of athletes, and I remember one particular guy, Daniel Byrne, we talked about, who was trying to break 3 hours for 3 years, and he actually in his Garmin watch ran 2:58, 2:59 twice, and the actual course gave him 3 hours and 30 seconds, 3 hours and 1 minute. And so the third year we had to take him back to the same course And he was saying, I was outside the MCG and I still had 400 metres to run. And it said I'd finish my marathon. But the race doesn't finish till you're inside the MCG and you pass the finish line. So we have to allow for that. So the third year we allowed for it. And I said to him, you have to run literally 3:58 to 3:57 to break 3 hours on this long course. And so that's what we mean by not all marathon courses are the same distance, but they should be, but they're not.
So let's go into the race. So one of the best things about Gary is his attention to detail and his willingness to live by our Triathlon principles of plan, prepare, perform. He's just so well planned and prepared. And an example of this is, he went to the course days early to be well prepared and be well organized, and then he drove the course the day before because it was not where he lives, so he really wanted to know what the course is like. And in his preparation, he's driving the course and figuring out all the areas, and he calls me and says, this is a disaster. This is advertised as a fast, flat PB course, and it's advertised as a Boston Marathon qualifier for people that want to run a quick course. And he's going, there's a section of farm road here that it goes down, which is completely bogged in the mud for 1 or 2 kilometers, and there's no clear path on it. Like, you just can't run. And I'm sort of going, geez, I'm so glad you drove the course, because that is really bad information to hear. And I said that kind of impacts our decision making a little bit. Like, on all the flat sections, I feel like you could maybe be a bit more aggressive in the plan, because you're going to get slowed down there, and you just have to run the pace that you run there, and you can't control that. And so really good planning and preparing. And fortunately for him, he double checked that the next morning when he got to the race and said to a marshal, what's with that farm section where it's completely muddy? And the marshal said, what are you talking about? There's no farm section. And in his recon, he'd gotten the GPS wrong and taken a wrong turn and gone down a path that didn't go down. So yeah, congrats to Gary for doing the recon. Unfortunate that mistake gave a little heart attack for both of us, going far out. This was the plan to get a really fast time, but even better for him to double check. And that's what planning, preparing is, to go and drive the course properly. And so from there, he is one of the few athletes that came to us with a conservative race plan. For a lot of the times for any race, triathlon, endurance, marathon, athletes would come to us and we just say, where have you done this in training? Because it's pretty aggressive. And if you haven't done it in training, we can't just turn up on race day and expect you can do that. We often have to bring athletes back a little bit and adjust their expectation. But for him, he'd proven in training that he could run 5:31 pace for 35 kilometers. And so his plan was a little bit conservative at 5:35 to 5:40 pace, which would get him under 4 hours. I said, Gary, you've already run 35K at 5:31, and that wasn't even a max effort. On race day, in peak conditions, you're going to be able to run sub 5:30. And you need to have that confidence that you can do that. And so our normal plan, start off conservative. He went out at 5:50 pace, just built into the marathon. I said, build into those 5:35 kilometers, but very quickly, do not be afraid to get to 5:30 pace and start running some 5:30 kilometers. And then at the back end, if you feel even better, you can do that. And he took that advice on board, had the guts and bravery to do it, and did the first half at 5:31 pace, was feeling really comfortable. There was no muddy section, and then did the second half at 5:27 pace. As good a negative split as you can get in a marathon. Average 5:29 for a 3:53 marathon, which he just could not wipe the smile off his face.
Yeah, and the way he finished, they're the things that you want to hone in on. He was running, I think you said, the last 3K at 5:18 pace, and passing people who were so dead in the, for the world to see. They were just struggling, and even though those people are struggling, it's amazing how they love to cheer you on when you're flying, and they're dead to the world. They're so, oh, God, great run, mate. It's quite amazing. Marathon runners who see someone who's really performing well will actually give you the kudos while you're out there, even though they're struggling themselves. But that's a really good thing to experience, is when you are flying, because let's face it, if you negative split, there isn't anybody who's going to be doing that in the race. There's, we could count, and you and I have done this. We've gone into a lot of marathons and counted how many, people ran fast the second half than they did the first half. And, they're on one hand in most, marathon races, and they're normally the people who have the best outcome. And so you are running faster than everybody around you. And so that is a really great feeling and a buzz.
Yeah, the percentage of actual negative splits is wildly low, and I have looked into the data extensively because people keep arguing with me about it, and I go, well, I have the data. So, but we talk a lot about coming home strong, and that normally means holding pace. That doesn't mean for most athletes, actually getting 10 seconds per kilometer quicker. A lot of people think, by the end, I might feel fresh enough to run, sub 5:20 pace. And we just go, that's not the feeling you're going to have at the 39 kilometer mark. You're going to be exhausted, but you should have the strength from training to hold that pace. That's feeling strong. When everyone else is dropping by 10 or 20 seconds per kilometer, they're fading badly. But for him to actually do the last 3K at 5:18 pace, that is literally flying home. That's sprinting home, relative to the pace you're running for a marathon, which is unreal.
And to be fair, if we were, being super analytical, we would say, well, we underestimated your pacing, and you could have actually started a lot faster. But that's the learnings that you get. You would much rather do it this way and then get super confident for his next run that, yep, 5:30 pace is my pace, and I actually did 5:30 whatever it was for the first half and 5:20 something for the second half. I know that next time I don't have to start at 5:50. I can start at 5:35, and instantly, if you're on a similar course, it's got similar terrain, similar temperature. A lot of things have to be marrying up the same. You've had the right preparation and tapering. Then you should be super confident that if you can finish the last 3, 4, 5K, 5:18, 5:20, 5:25, that tells you that you probably got a little bit more left in the tank. So you have the opportunity to take a little bit more risk, and that's a good thing to learn as well. And that's something that I'm sure he'll take on board.
And everyone wants to know, what did he actually do? So let's get into the exciting stuff, because everyone always asks, what was the actual training? What were the keys here? And I think we're going to go through some of the keys to training, and I think there's a few take-home messages that are really important for this example. And I think one of them is that he just does a lot of easy long running. He just gets really consistent kilometers up. Now, he doesn't do crazy amount of kilometers, but I think one of the first things to point out is that he's just every week he's always managing just to get a couple of at least 60, 70, 80 minute runs in. And that's a big difference compared to just doing, your easy runs at 30 or 40 minutes. I think that time on feet has really, really helped him. And I will commend him here. And this is what I love about Gary, is that he just loves running, and he just loves long runs. And he always puts it in his notes after, I just love that run, like absolutely love that run. And for a lot of people, they see the long run and it's a little bit of fear and they go, oh, not another boring long run. But I love his reframe on it. He just goes, this is my favorite time. I love getting up super early. I just got the road to myself. I just love going for a 70 or 80 minute run. And that might not be his long run for the week. And I just love that.
I just have to butt in. People who are saying they struggle to run, and I know you actually said this the other day in your long run, you were really struggling with this. And I just wanted to scream out loud, you should be so grateful that you are able to run. And I know that's a warped perspective from me, but I can't run. Running was my passion, and I give anything to run. And I love the fact that Gary's just saying, I just love that run. That was great. And of course it is a hard thing to do. It's a challenge to keep running for so long. It's not a normal activity that you go out and run for 2.5 hours. So I get that, but you've got to remember and put it in perspective that, it is a privilege to be able to run still. And as a 62-year-old, he's one of the few people, a lot of older runners who are great runners when they were younger literally can't run at all. And I'm in that category. Not in the great runner category. I'm in the category that can't run at all. So that's a really good thing to hear.
Yeah, and I'll even give an example of some shifts he's starting at 4:30 a.m. and he's saying to me, all right, I'm going to get up at 2 and get my long run done before shift and then get into shift. And I'm going, Gary, I don't think that's a good idea. You really need to prioritize sleep. Can you find a better time to do it? You don't have to do it at 2:30 a.m. in the morning. And he goes, no, don't worry. I love it. I love being the only one on the road. And I think that's fantastic. He just loves it that much. He goes, that's my solitude time, to get into it. And I just think that's awesome. So in terms of Ks per week, over the last 3 to 6 months, he's probably averaged 37 Ks a week. But in peak marathon phase, he was more running 50 to 60 Ks a week. But that was only from 4 runs per week. So he averaged 3 to 4 and never normally above 4. And so that's a really important point, that just 4 runs a week, hitting in peak phase, 50 to 58 Ks per week, but getting a lot of fitness from cross training, which we always talk about, and just prioritizing bike endurance and some key bike sessions where it was a lot of easy running, some tempo marathon efforts, with swimming and cycling built in there, because he's got his next goal is a 70.3. So I think that's, it's not outrageous running. It's not unachievable. It's all doable, and it's really specific key runs to get in.
I think, George, listeners have to really understand that if you have the ability to swim and ride, that is actually an advantage if you're training for a marathon. If you're just a marathon runner who doesn't have access to a bike and can't swim, and let's face it, there are a lot of runners out there who can't swim. That's why they choose to run. If you've got that facility available, swimming and riding, that is really helpful for your marathon running. And you know that I've been pushing you on one hard bike ride each week in your marathon preparation, because we can't run you fast. We want to do a couple of hard run sessions, but even you as a young guy, it's too much load for your body. We're risking huge injury. So I'm getting you to do some VO2 bike sessions, and you're getting your heart and lungs huffing and puffing. You're exploding on these sessions, but you're not damaging your running legs. You're getting the stimulus that we are after for that intensity from riding. And so if he didn't have that facility as a rider or a swimmer, then we would have to risk a bit more with his running. But we wouldn't really risk that much. We would only do one run out of those 4, and we'd probably add one more run into his program if he could cope with it. Mm-hmm. But that one extra run would only be some slight intensity, which would be probably half marathon pace, or somewhere between 10K and half marathon pace, where we're not trying to get him to do 400s on the track to get his intensity, because he'll break down and he'll lose his consistency. As a 62-year-old, that's a given. And even as a 20 or 30-year-old, that's probably, risky as well. So every athlete must have their own set of circumstances before we decide what works. And we're giving you an idea of what worked for Gary, but that doesn't mean that you just grab this and take that on board with what you do. You've got some subtle differences, nuances that you probably need a coach to actually work out. What should your running program look like?
I think one thing you did really well was when work changes were happening, which, as we said, happened almost every cycle, we would just say, okay, let's shuffle things around and make sure we hit all our running sessions, because that's most important right now towards the marathon. But then the next most important was probably that endurance ride. I said, if you can get that in over the 10 days, where can we fit that? And he really made sure he got that in despite shift changes. I think that would really hold him in good stead to get that extra aerobic fitness without having to run more volume, exactly what you're talking about. And one last point I wanted to talk about was on the plan, prepare, perform motto. In our podcast episode a couple of weeks ago, where you gave us your biggest lessons over the last 4 decades of being an athlete and coaching, one lesson that you mentioned was your meticulous analysis of training sessions and races. And it's not enough just to do them, but you want to look back on what did you do and did that actually work? Did it result in a test improvement or a race improvement? And Gary writes detailed notes on every single session in Training Peaks. He writes how he felt, what his plan was for the session, what his motivation was for the second session, did he succeed, and why it happened. Why did he succeed or why did he not for that session? And he writes that every single time. And he doesn't just do that for the coach, he does that for himself as well to look back on. And I think that's a big reason that he stays on track and he stays motivated and he stays disciplined. And that is next level kind of analysis, which I really love.
Yeah, the Training Peaks post activities comment section is really your diary, the athlete's diary. And look, the coach will look at that, but I instruct our coaches never to write in that in that athlete's post activities notes, because that's their diary and that's their information. And you can flip back 6 months and check out what you did for that long run, and you've got detailed notes about how I felt that day, what my pace was, what my fueling was. You should be in those long endurance sessions talking about what fueling you did on that day, so that you can really understand what the weather conditions were. They're really important details that help you understand where you are now, where you've come from, and I think that attention to detail is such an advantage if you can. I know it's time consuming, but that's part of your training program, is to plan things and prepare, and then the training sessions every time, the doing bit. That's only one aspect.
I just want to read out his text after the race because it's just so nice and such a good way to finish off the story. He said, I wouldn't have done that without last night's conversation. It helped me adjust to be more comfortable and okay with hitting 530s. And I'm very grateful for your confidence in me. It was a perfect day and I made sure my attitude was right. My recon was so important because I was familiar and comfortable with where I was and where the particular points were. When I got to 32 Ks, I was keen to slightly increase my pace, and counting down the last 10 kilometers, I was so excited I couldn't stop smiling. I was on top of the world in the last 2 kilometers. Not only did I do a PB, not only did I go under 4 hours, I finished over 2 minutes quicker than the best version of my plan. The finish line was very emotional. I cried when I crossed the line. I've never done that before. That's just what you want.
Yeah, that's a great finish too. People say, well, gee, 350, that's not sensational. Well, it is. It's incredibly sensational. And that's the thing that a lot of listeners need to get a perspective on. You don't have to be a 2:20:30 marathon runner to say that it's a great outcome. We get so much joy out of a lot of our beginners who could be 5-hour marathon runners who end up being 4.5-hour marathon runners. And to see someone go 30 minutes quicker over this space of time, that brings us so much joy. So I think everybody listening to that, you can get such emotional positivity, endorphins, whatever you like to call it, from just working hard, preparing well, doing what's necessary, executing to the nth degree, and then getting the final result. That's what this sport is about, and that's what makes people do marathons. That's what makes people go and train. That's what makes people reach out for coaching. It's you want to be the best version of yourself, and you're going to spend all this time training. Why not do it properly and get some guidance and feedback as you're going, and look, the end result, it's not always going to be rosy. There's going to be disappointments, and that's even better that you've got someone to share it with and try and work out what went wrong, and so we can fix it next time. It's not always going to be these stories, and we don't often bring a story up to people's attention on these case studies because we don't have many people who don't actually over the journey of 6 months to 6 years find somewhere where they've improved, and that's the message that's really super important. It's your passion. It's not your job. It's what you want to do, and you want to enjoy it. So this is the end result that we're so grateful for. When it gets them so emotional that they're in tears about what they've just achieved.
If you'd like to get the same level of detailed coaching and analysis and feedback to improve your own running, if you're aiming for a marathon or your next Ironman and you want to improve all aspects, or your next half Ironman, it's not just based on running, you can go to travelcoaching.com.au and apply to get coaching there. We coach all our athletes the same way in terms of our principles and our methodology, but as you just heard in this episode, we apply it to you individually. So go to travelcoaching.com.au to apply to get coaching. We have a guarantee that if you don't improve in the first block of training, it's money back for you. And we don't say you get all your results in the first block of training. We just know straight away we can get you to improve. And as you've heard from this episode, over the course of the journey, we can get you to improve massively, which is the goal. So that's it for this episode. A big congratulations to Gary. We're very proud to have Gary as a Tri-Velo athlete. He represents everything we love about training and racing and mindset. Congratulations, Gary. We can't wait to see you continue to improve in the marathon and your triathlon journey. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.